think we spend so much of our lives in what you call the functional world. To actually kind of take a step back and go slightly existential is very frightening. And actually it takes courage to be able to do it, because, that's where the monsters are, right?
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Burnt Chef Journal, hosted by myself, Chris Hall, the founder of the Burnt Chef Project. This week's guest is Jaqueline Wise, who runs Positively Delicious, a business based on mindfulness eating and well-being. And she talks to us about how she's taking the complete role change from the industry of sales and marketing and moving into hospitality, where she's found her real calling. It's an extremely interesting chat. There's loads of good topics discussed, so it's well worth sticking around to the end. So please do enjoy this episode.
Lamb Weston are your partner in potatoes. We're a leading global frozen potato manufacturing business with a wealth of experience in offering a portfolio of high-end and quality products on a consistent basis. We supply the pub, casual dining, QSR sectors. We believe in wellbeing through potatoes, and we are very proud to support the Burnt Chef Project, here to offer our support and help for those that need it, and any solutions that you need for you and your business.
Hello.
Good morning.
Hi. Sorry, my plant is taking over here.
Nice. It looks like a sweet place. Have you got a surfboard up on the wall as well?
Yeah, that's a little bamboo shorty, which is quite fun. So yeah, so not at the moment, because obviously we can't go surfing. So
listen, you're the first woman that we have had on the podcast. It's not deliberate. That's unfortunately just the way that this masculine industry seems to have gone. But you'll be pleased to know that you share the day with Claire Smith as well. So we have you on in the morning and Claire Smith on in the afternoon. So
well, yeah. She's incredible. I mean, I don't feel worthy to be sharing the day with someone like her. She's incredible. But she's really inspirational. So that's awesome to hear. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. You're welcome. So I guess this is a good time to start and just naturally flow into the conversation. What I like to do with all of my guests, just to get a little bit more familiar with your background, and I know we've spoken a little bit in the past, but just explain to people who you are and sort of what brought you into hospitality and your journey up until now, if you can.
Okay, so hi, my name is Jaqueline Wise. I was born in Guildford, and I was brought up on a small holding with animals around me, etc. I've always loved food and loved cooking. I grew up, growing my own veggies with my family, going fishing with my dad, and always been connected to my food and where it's come from. That's been something that's been important for me my whole life. I went to uni, studied history, and then ended up working in marketing and advertising in London for a while, which was well paid. But then after a few years, I just ended up feeling absolutely miserable. I wasn't doing anything creative. And cooking was always something I came back to as a way of making me feel more like myself, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. It always has been, and I think probably always will be. It was a constant friend when other things weren't so constant. So it started as a dream to want to be able to change my career into using, my love of food and cooking into something that would actually earn me money. But obviously, a dream without a strategy or a plan without a strategy is just a dream, right? That's what they say. So I saved up and I did the Cordon Bleu chef course at Tante Marie, and then also completed the level 4 in professional culinary arts diploma as well. But while I was working, or while I was studying, I was also working in the industry. So when I quit my job in London, I also went to work in, basically anywhere that would have me. I just wanted to hit the ground running, not to mention that financially I really needed to make it work as soon as possible, as soon as I got out of chef school. So I worked the local bakers making bread till 2 a.m. I worked in the local pub. I worked in the local butchers. That was probably one of my favourite ones, actually, Rawlings in Cranley. I think I worked there for about a month, and they paid me £20 cash a day and a pie. It's great. And I was there female apron on, boning out shoulders of pork and learning, proper traditional butchery from scratch. Naturally, the only woman there. It was a bit intimidating to start with, but I quite quickly realised that, as long as you've got a sense of humour, and you kind of just, you show willing, and you're reliable. And I helped them with some other areas of the business. Like I helped them a bit with their social media and so other things. Anytime that I could try and add value, I did, because they were doing me a huge favour, and helping me understand the industry. I got enough experience to get on the agency chef circuit before I actually started my formal training, mainly because I walked into a pub to ask to be a waitress to get some extra money, and they said, oh, actually we don't need a waitress, we need a chef, can you cook? I went, yes. Like, okay, great, you can be head chef for 2 weeks. So what? Literally, they threw me in and I was terrified. But I learned quite quickly. I stepped up and I had to get my head around a professional kitchen in a very short space of time with pretty much zero experience. But by the end of the 2 weeks, I was selling more things from my specials menu than I was from their main menu. And thank goodness for Googling recipes, because otherwise I would have been really stuck. But I found out later the reason that they took such a risk was that they were selling the pub, and the current owners just didn't really care about, the fact that, the kitchen was being run by someone who wasn't really very experienced, because it was just, they had to honour that as part of the contract before it went over to the new owners. However, it was an absolute blessing for me, because it really, it gave me that kind of exposure to the kind of, when you're on the pass, check on, it was the buzz. It was a bit like that kind of sales kind of, kick that I was getting every time when I worked in the industry in sales before. I'd make a sale and I'd feel good. And it was that same kind of thing, but in a much healthier way at that point. Although it was very long hours and it was quite hard work, it was fun. Anyway, I went to Tom Marie, started there, and I carried on working while I was studying, which did affect my grades a little bit, but I didn't have another choice really financially. The deal that I made with my family is that they had lent me some extra money that I needed to do the course, but in return for looking after the farm for 4 months while they went on a trip. And so my boyfriend, now husband, came with me, and we were looking after the place there. But then when they returned, it was a bit difficult with all 4 of us in the same place, and we didn't have anywhere to go. My parents and my other half fell out rather dramatically. And we literally overnight was sort of homeless, and my course was just starting, and it was really difficult. Obviously I could have stayed there if I wanted to, but I didn't want to, I wanted to be with my other half. And thank goodness all that's blown over now and it's fine, but it's taken us a long way to kind of work those relationships to something that's more balanced and healthy for us all. Anyway, I got taken in by a pub near Reigate, and I was working there as an agency chef, and they were like, oh, well, you're not your usual happy self, Jackie. And I told them, they're like, oh, fine, just move into the spare room upstairs, you can move in tomorrow. So we did, and they were like a sort of an adopted aunt and uncle. We stayed there and worked in the kitchens there. My other half worked behind the bar as well. He's a quantity surveyor by trade. And he was working on a project at the time, which was like an invention, and he put a lot of his own money into it. And unfortunately, it didn't quite come off. And so we were living on like leftovers from chef school and chips from the kitchen. I remember 3 days in a row, we had cheesecake and chips for dinner. Like, it was, you think that might be great, but after a while, you're just like, oh my goodness, I literally, my car was so knackered. I used to have to tie a scarf to the door and then sit on the door. On the scarf to stop the door opening while I was driving 5 round to my school and back. And luckily I made one really amazing friend there who, like me, wanted to make being a chef work for her and for her new kind of career moving forwards. But a lot of the other people on that particular course were sort of, they were doing it for something to do, if you see what I mean. So it was quite difficult trying to kind of carve my future from that, because although the chef school was amazing, it didn't really give me much direction of sort of how to really run my own business. I didn't even know how to draw up an invoice or do anything like that. I had to work that all out for myself. So I graduated from there, and then I started doing a little bit of my own work, just picking up the private dining here and there. I was still living in the pub at this time. I was doing everything from their kitchen. I worked in a couple of other kitchens and restaurants as well, anywhere and everywhere I could sort of get shifts, and I got a lot of experience in different places, from a few Michelin star kitchens to Buckingham Palace to the Ritz, where I was offered a full-time job, which was amazing. But wow. I moved out of London specifically to not be, part of that world anymore. And although it was an amazing opportunity, they wanted me to start as a breakfast chef. And that would have I couldn't even get there were no trains from where I was living, and I didn't want to be in London anymore, and I just couldn't make it happen, but it was a good confidence boost, and then basically the business grew from there. So within a year I didn't need to take any agency work back to kind of keep me going. I was having my own clients, and then I also managed to I took my dad out for a beer and gave him a 10 grand check, saying, here you go, I've earned the money back. Here's the money back for the loan, which was one of the proudest moments in my life, I can tell you.
Oh, wow.
Which was great. So made that happen. I just worked every hour of every day, just nonstop, because so many of my friends doubted me as well. So many people were like, why on earth would you leave a well-paid job in London to be a chef? Like, what are you doing? And I found that really difficult, because I'm a kind of person where I get a lot of, I'm quite sensitive, and I care what people think. And that's something I've had to work on, always thinking, oh my goodness, what are other people going to think of me? When actually the really important thing is to remember, well, what do I think of me? And to make decisions based on what I think's best for me and for those that I love, rather than, worrying all the time what other people think, because actually it really doesn't matter. So that was something I struggled with. But so anyway, fast forward a few years, I run 4 successful businesses now, but I've had a lot of bumps along the way. So I would say anxiety first became an issue for me when I left home and went to university, but I didn't realize that that's what it was. I was quite protected as a child. My parents, they were both incredible, amazing people, and I love and adore them. But, they were wild child people of the 70s. They didn't want me to make the same mistakes that they did, which then meant that I was completely unprepared, especially as an only child, for real life. And the kind of, I was just more resilient in ways that I needed to be. And I hadn't formed my own sense of self very well. I would take on other people's views as my own without realizing I'd done it, because I'd always been sort of guided in what to think, do, and say. And it took me a while to sort of grow up, basically. And I think moving towards being a chef was a massive step to kind of me being like, no, I'm doing this for me. And luckily, my parents and my family were very supportive, which is great, as was my other half. But I was so desperate to kind of prove to everybody that I could be a success, that essentially, I worked too hard and I made no provision for myself, and all the wheels fell off. Anxiety is a strange one. To describe it to someone that hasn't experienced it, for me, what it would do is it would manifest itself in kind of a feeling. It would build, and it would be a feeling like almost like a pain, like a physical pain within my chest. And my head would start to feel like it was buzzing, and often I'd retreat to the bathroom and lock the door. That was kind of a safe place to go. And then it would just sort of build from there, almost like a kind of an energy, negative energy, kind of consuming my whole body, till all I could focus on was the fact that I had a pain in my chest, and I was convinced genuinely that I was going to die. It was that bad.
Sounds
just
like
pure fear.
Panic. It's almost like a panic attack then, hey?
Exactly. But I had no idea that that's what it was. And I'd be angry with myself. I'd be like, put yourself together, you're pathetic, come on. You've got all this stuff you need to do, you can't let these people down, you've got to prove yourself. And I had all this negative self-talk, which really didn't do me any favors. And it kind of came and went. So sometimes I was able to sort of ignore it or hide it, I think. And I'm a very open sort of person in most ways. I'm very bubbly and positive in so many ways. People would, they wouldn't expect it, if that makes sense, of me, which almost made it harder because I felt like people relied on me to be the cheerful one and cheer them up. And around me, I was always, and I still am, I like to help other people. And, basically I felt that I was letting other people down if I wasn't giving to them all the time.
But mental illness doesn't have a personality trait. You don't have to always be dragging your heels and looking somber if you're depressed. You can actually be quite a happy, bubbly person on the outside, but inside depression or anxiety is running rife. So, and I think that's quite a common misconception, isn't it? Like if someone's just looking normal, you have no idea what's going on behind the scenes. Absolutely no idea. They could have had a complete distressing moment only 5 minutes beforehand.
Yeah, I mean, I think about, basically it's been baby steps for me. I think first of all, understanding, what it was important, but also then taking the steps to kind of help with that. So I think the crucial moment came around when my husband and I got engaged, and we started to plan the wedding together. Obviously it's a stressful time with lots of family expectations flying around, and it was impossible to keep everybody happy. And what I'd realized is that through my life there's quite a few different versions of Jackie. I wasn't always working out who I really was as something I just hadn't spent time and effort doing, and I was one way with some people and I was a different way with other people, which I realized in hindsight has really tripped me up because, people often thought maybe I was inauthentic. If you brought those groups together, then what? Hang on. And I would, that would make me feel a little, I'd be confused but not understand why. And basically I had no self-awareness. So my other half and we started to, it started to show in kind of our relationship as well. And he suffers with, anxiety a bit as well, although we didn't really know what that was. And he would have angry outbursts. And we're actually at the moment exploring what we think is the part of the sort of the collection of things that we've had to kind of work through, is that he's on the autistic spectrum, sort of high functioning Asperger's. So he doesn't have that same empathy in the same way that other people do, whereas I'm exceptionally empathetic and giving, and I'll give and give and give until there's nothing left, basically, and then resentment builds. And essentially that's what had happened in our relationship. So we went and got some help, both separately, and I had psychotherapy, and so did he, and it made a huge difference, and it just opened up my eyes to so many things which I just kind of buried. And I felt confident enough to tell people about it, and that's only grown. I'll tell anybody who will listen that, oh yeah, I've had psychotherapy, and my husband and I have had marriage counselling. I would have killed him otherwise. He'd probably be buried under the patio by now if we hadn't. No.
We don't condone killing on this podcast, but
him to me, I don't know, especially when he gave up his job to work with me full time, and support me and my businesses. So you can imagine what stresses that can bring if you're living and working as well with various issues which you haven't learned to deal with. But basically that was a really important stepping stone for me, and it helped me to kind of put boundaries in with some of my relationships, and also work on that kind of building that self-awareness of who I was, and what mattered to me, my beliefs and my kind of ideals. And I started to journal at that point, which is something was a real turning point, and I recommend that to anybody. Journaling, not, oh, today I went to the shops and I bought this and I did that. No, it doesn't matter. Ask yourself, how do I feel today? And how do I want to feel? And those two questions helped me and continue to help me, because I'll check in with myself and then maybe form a strategy about where I want, how I want to get to where I want to feel, if that makes sense. And I also started to realize that cooking was a way that I could use my time when I was preparing or rhythmically chopping vegetables. There was a meditative quality to it, and I could use that time to kind of do the same thing and ask the same questions. And that became something that I felt I could maybe share with other people as well. But yeah, fast forward, quite a bit of time. I think having had some more psychotherapy and spent more time trying to understand myself better, I did some work using a concept called life traps. I don't know if you're aware of the concept, but basically there's a test and you can find out what your life traps are. Everybody has various life traps, and essentially it's your version of normal that you learnt when you were a child or a young adult, and therefore what you are subconsciously attracted to because it makes you feel safe in some way, even if it is unhealthy for you. And therefore, for example, extreme example might be, a girl who's been abused by her father might end up with an abusive man because there's part of her that feels that is normal and what is meant to happen, but it's a subconscious thing. So adding the kind of conscious thought into that, like, okay, so, sometimes when you have that trigger point where you think, you go off on one and you're like, why am I reacting so strongly to this? Why do I feel such a pull, such a hook, such a strong emotion to something? When actually what you're doing is you're reacting to sort of past trauma or past things that you've learned. And then recognizing that, having enough self-awareness to recognize that. And essentially the term I use is, and then kill the game. And you can transcend and rationalize that feeling. And suddenly you just feel lighter. Through that, but I've been able to really, really conquer so many of the things that would cause me anxiety and lead to panic attacks, as I had described. But unless I take time and make provision for myself, i.e. journaling, yoga, walking my dog, not looking at my phone too much, keeping it out of the bedroom, for example, getting enough sleep, all these different things, then I can feel it starts to slip and it could creep back. So it's the age old, you can't pour from the cup, right?
Exactly. No, yeah, 100%. And I think that, again, different person. I resonate with your particular story because I think my personality type and also the journey that I went on, not obviously going to culinary school, we have our own separate paths, but the particular points about not learning resilience at an earlier enough age and also not becoming self-aware, like you do end up giving because you don't know how to say no and you don't know how to pull back and protect yourself.
Also, then suddenly you get this new feeling, which is, and I still struggle with this now, especially as a mum. I have a 18-month-old daughter who is brilliant. Abigail's amazing, but she's also a complete pickle sometimes. But it's the guilt, mum guilt, and I get that. I had that feeling before I even had a child, and now I get it more as well. Like that kind of, and rationalizing that sometimes quite difficult. So, if you're putting yourself first, because it doesn't come naturally to you, even though you have the self-awareness, there's part of you that sometimes can still feel bad about it. And it's about rationalizing that and again reinforcing a healthier kind of belief system of, no, I have to look after myself first. It's the aeroplane oxygen masks falling thing. You've got to put yours on first before you put it on your child. And that is so hard to sometimes keep sight of.
It is. And it's also interesting the point that you talked about learned behavior as well. And that's not just in terms of personality, but I think that also applies very strongly to different roles within hospitality. So you're not only learning how to react to certain situations from, previous role models within your life, but I think certainly from what we've seen, both you and I in the industry have seen, examples where perhaps people have learned to manage incorrectly. They've learned that by shouting and throwing things across a restaurant or across a kitchen is the way that you can strike fear into people, and that's going to get them to blindly follow you. But that learned behavior is something that, again, it comes back to that self-actualization, that self-realization of going, right, firstly, is this the right way to react? Why am I reacting like this? And how can I improve my reactions and emotional responses to the situation?
Absolutely. I think we spend so much of our lives in what you call the functional world. To actually kind of take a step back and go slightly existential is very frightening. And actually it takes courage to be able to do it, because, you know, that's where the monsters are, right? That's where this is. And you basically, you go, you know, I've been through an experience where, you know, I've sort of gone through various stages of anxiety. And then a few years ago, I got to a point where things were really tough again in my relationship with my partner. We were trying to get pregnant. It wasn't happening. We were more and more distant. Business was, you know, it was very stressful kind of in the wedding industry, but I never allowed any of that ever to show to any of my clients, obviously. And I have an amazing team around me that's supporting me. But basically, you know, we kind of I got stuck, you know, and I'd lost the self-awareness, and I got so down. I remember at a train station considering that it would be much easier just to jump in front of the train. And I'd never seriously considered that before. And I found myself seriously considering that. And that was terrifying. But in that moment, I also realized, you know, that kind of, well, nothing really matters, actually. At the end of the day, we're just little dots on a planet which is going to burn up into the atmosphere in 4 million years' time anyway. You know what? Nothing actually matters. And that's terrifying. At the same time, there's part of it which is entirely liberating. What actually, you know, whatever I do is a choice. And, you know, if I'm not happy, I'm in charge of my life here. Does your life rule you, or do you rule your life? Like, which way round is it? The dog wag the tail wag the dog. And I think it's at that moment that I took back control, and everything shifted again. And I would say since then, I've really managed to redirect my energies into things that I truly believe in. And I've also managed to open up a far more kind of and more engagement with my team as well, to talk about all mental health areas. You know, and we joke now amongst all of us, you know, like, oh, welcome to the team. What's your, you know, what do you struggle with? You know, what's your baggage? You know, oh, right, well, you're OCD. Okay, great. Well, I, you know, suffer with this. Oh, you've got Tourette's. Oh, okay. Well, I've got anxiety. Oh, what pills are you on for depression? Oh, okay, fine. And, you know, we talk about it, but it's, you know, I try to make sure that they all feel safe. And we have a bit of a saying, which is that, look, you know what, it's okay to have a wobble. And you know what, as long as we don't all have a wobble at the same time, which is highly unlikely, then we can hold each other up. And we do. And I'm so lucky because I have got the most incredible, loyal team, and I love them.
Such an open culture, and quite a refreshing point of view in terms of being able to completely and utterly stamp stigma out on day one and be like, okay, cool. You know, do you have any illnesses that you want to tell about, and can we make light of the situation and make you feel more included as a result? It's and
it's you know, it's basically it's the age old, it's okay not to be okay. And yeah, I mean, I never tried to make light of it as such, but at the same time, like, let's work with it. Let's not define ourselves by that. But let's have a kind of a collective self-awareness, where we all look out for each other. And I think that's where I've been so lucky, because often, you know, I speak to some other caterers in the wedding industry, and they're like, oh God, I find it so hard to find staff. I can never get good staff. They never stick around. And I'm like, well, I've got too many. They're really nice. And I'm so lucky to have that. But I look after them, you know, and I'm flexible as well. We have a lot of women that work with us. Also, probably we're about 90% women. And I think, you know, the nature of the work is it is quite flexible, because I have them mostly on a freelance basis, and then they can choose the work that they want to do around family life, etc., etc. And that's another conversation entirely, trying to manage being a mum and working in hospitality. You know, I remember reading an interview with Angela Hartnett once, a friend of mine, Sloan, did, and her biggest regret, she said, was not having children. That just made me so sad, because she couldn't do both, she said. And by the time she realized it, and she had the self-awareness that that's what she wanted, it was too late. And I was just so shocked by that, but also admired her for her honesty and openness. And I think part of what I really want to try and do is redefine what being a chef looks like. You know, I am very successful as a private dining chef, and I have a collection of other chefs that go out and complete events on my behalf. Especially through COVID, I think the way we eat is starting to change. You know, there is more demand for private dining at home, restaurant at home experiences. And obviously, God knows how many ways people in the industry at the moment have learned to pivot, and I admire them all. It's incredible how resourceful everyone's been. But moving forwards, I would love to try and help more people get into that market and create a community around it, because it can be quite lonely working on your own, and being able to sort of have some sort of community element to that would be great. And also to be taken seriously if you're a private chef as a chef, because a lot of the thing is, oh, well, you haven't got a restaurant, you're not a real chef. And that is probably an insecurity I carry anyway, if I'm honest. But at the same time, I know that I'm a real chef. I wouldn't have got a Masterchef for Professionals if I wasn't a real chef. And I do pop-up restaurants and all the rest of it. And why does it matter anyway what they say? It's how I feel. Do I think I'm a real chef? Yes, I do.
Definition of a chef is a professional cook, typically the chief cook in a restaurant or hotel. So ironically, the dictionary has almost stigmatized the role in saying that you're not a chef unless you're working in a restaurant or hotel. But now that dangerously needs updating, because, as you say, I think the role of a chef, or the role of anyone within hospitality, is to provide a great level of service, to put the passion and creativity on a plate, and also or in a drink, and also to be able to provide their guests with the ultimate experience, and to leave, get them leaving happier than when they walked in.
Exactly. There's so much more than that. And I think also, we have to hold fast to our own definitions of things, and taking time to work out what's important and what isn't to us is more important than what the dictionary says in many ways. But it's difficult, isn't it? I think we all struggle with sort of confidence in many ways. I know I do. And ultimately, what I realize is that I need to measure up to my own expectations of myself. But then sometimes those expectations are completely unrealistic. In a life trap sense, you would call it unrelenting standards, which can also drive other life traps, such as approval seeking and learning to take your sense of self, a sense of worth from yourself rather than others, is something that I've, really had to work on, and I still have to work on, if I'm honest, because that life trap was built into me when I was little. And yeah, it's just having awareness of that so that you can kind of rationalize it. I think really, for me, I think you never have all the answers, and that's okay. I'm never going to truly make it, or whatever that means. That's okay. You know what? As long as, I'm enjoying my life, I'm finding moments of joy. And in the moments that are the opposite, I can remember, the kind of, I don't know if you've heard of the poet Keats. He had a concept of negative capability. So in the moments where you are at your absolute rock bottom, you're running a service, everything's gone wrong, you've got stroppy clients, I've had it before, I've had all sorts, and you just think, oh my god, everything is falling away, it's just, but you know what, without moments where things are really rough, you have absolutely no comparison to realize how good the good things are. And therefore, who wants to live a life which is constantly in the middle ground? I mean, I don't. That sounds really dull as far as I'm concerned. I like an adventurous spirit. I like adventure, and what I realized is that I'm okay with riding the roller coaster, but having the self-awareness when you're in the down bits to know that they will make the up bits feel even better can just somehow make them a little bit more manageable.
Well said. Very profound. And I think that's the same for mental health as well. I genuinely do believe those that have had mental illness or experiences of mental illness are probably more perceptually aware of life and what goes on around them, I mean,
I think in many ways, it is the age old, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And every time I, have a wobble of some sort, and then I am able to overcome it, it only brings more confidence. I remember once I did, it was one of the very first weddings I did, and I had to do I was like sharing style. I was doing feasting style way before everybody started doing feasting style. We had a massive hog roast, and we did dauphinoise potatoes, pork choux, lovely seasonal vegetables, all down the centre of these massive tables. 150 people, I think, in a marquee. Bearing in mind, I'd never catered for more than about 20 at this point, and I was just thrown in the deep end. Yes, I can do it. What's the question? Okay, the answer is always yes, and I will work out how later. That's what I was like in the early stages of my career. And then I had another in the same weekend, the next day in the same marquee. We then had to do a canapé party for 200 people more, which were like the kind of bride's parents, friends from all the local churches and all the rest of it. And it was all very, had to be, all had to be perfect, especially because my parents were coming to the wedding as guests. Extra pressure. And this lovely lady who was the bride who booked me was a client of my mum's, and she believed in me because she'd known me since I was quite young, and she'd given me the opportunity basically, and that only made me feel more compelled to do it perfectly. And then on the Saturday night, somehow again my other half, my parents managed to have some big hoo-ha about I don't know what. Yeah, I think the car broke down. I don't know what happened, but basically for me that kind of conflict was sort of the thing I was most afraid of, and I was in bits, absolutely in bits. And I probably slept all of about 2 hours that night. And I knew that I had to get up the next day, put the right face on and perform and go and do this event and smile and do it. And you know what? I bloody did it. And I nailed it. And it just I remind myself of times where I've struggled and then I have still managed to do things like that. And it gives me confidence.
Yeah, and
but you know what? Yeah, and what do they say? That's the phrase. In crisis comes growth.
It's true, and I think you again with the point that you summarised is that you have to know what your limits are and push through them to a certain degree, but not doing it. We're not talking about personal sacrifice here. We're not talking about 16-hour days for 7-8 days on the road, but it's small things. And I even though I think I was actually depressed at this moment in my life when I was 17, I did it's like a survival weekend to go to Ecuador for 6 months, and it was proper. Wow. Get off the bus and they take your phone off you, they take your torch off you, they give you a hand-drawn map, and they say, right, you're walking around that loop in the dark on your own, right? This was in Wales in the middle of winter. So you walk around and you get back, it's a 2-mile circuit, and you get back to the start and they say, right, go on, around again you go. And you're like, I'm tired. Go around again. And they did that another 2 times. So by the end of it, they came back and said, right, how many miles do you reckon you've done? If you can give us the right answer, we'll not send you around again. And I was like, I'm disorientated. I'm tired. I've just been sent around this loop 4 times. I was like, well, I don't know, about 12 miles. And they were like, yeah, you have. So well done. Now you can go to this field and put your tent up in the pitch black at 2 o'clock in the morning. But that whole weekend was that sort of theme, diving into water and getting absolutely, having to come out, get dressed in the snow, put dry clothes on. But that entire weekend, the level of confidence and resilience, I was on cloud 9 after that, because I've realized that I was capable of going through some hard times. I was capable of, looking after myself within quite harsh surroundings. And sometimes when it does get tough, you sort of look back to that and go, actually, as a human being, I'm a lot more capable than perhaps, I think about myself sometimes. And you need those opportunities to prove to yourself that you're able to do it.
Yeah, and I think with parenting, it's so difficult. Obviously I'm on the early kind of journey of that. But like even now I see, my daughter, she'll run around, she'll fall over. Right, she's 18 months, she falls over all the time, right? And the initial reaction as a mum is to swoop in and go, oh, you're okay, and pick her up myself. But quite early on I had that realization, and I went, hang on a minute, I'm just going to leave her for a minute. And you know what, she gets up herself and off she goes, and she's just, even at that age you can start building a little bit of resilience. I don't need to come in and rescue her. She's got that. Okay, if she's fallen over and she's really hurt herself, fine, I'm right there. But if she's just kind of toppled a bit and just taken a bit of a surprise, you know what, she can put herself back on her own 2 feet. I think it's so important to allow people to do that. And I think also it's the same thing in a relationship sometimes. You can get into a relationship with someone where you'll end up being completely enmeshed with them, and you do stuff for them because they're not able to do it for themselves, or they struggle with elements of it, or sometimes it's simply just easier to do it for them. And then you start to build a resentment that they're not being a team player. When actually, it's not all their fault. You have to take a step back for someone else to take a step forward sometimes. And it's the same in managing a team. I'm definitely guilty of this. I am, especially before I went on MasterChef, I was a complete perfectionist about everything. And I wanted everything plated in a certain way, done exactly how I would, all the rest of it. And what I realized is that I was consistently undermining the confidence of my team without realizing I was doing it. And actually, you know what? Just because I preferred it done that way didn't actually mean that was the best way of doing it. And just because I may have more experience than someone didn't necessarily mean that I couldn't learn something from them. And it was a massive shift. And I, genuinely, I like to see myself as a bit more of a sponge. And I'm very happy for my chefs, to kind of, and my team, my front of house team as well, to take more initiative. And then if they do, they take ownership, and then they care. And it's just, overall, you get a much better energy. And it's not easy running a wedding catering business when, you have to kind of get that semblance of that kitchen kind of energy, when you're all, yes, chef, check on, go, go, go. And you've got to get that pretty much within the space of an hour or so, a couple of hours, to be able to make the service work. Whereas obviously, often to get that feeling and that connection in a kitchen can take, weeks, months, years sometimes. And actually try to kind of understand that and kind of get it to click in as quickly as possible is important. And yeah, I would definitely say, the whole taking a step back so others can take a step forward thing is an important lesson that I learned. And also it reduced my anxiety because I wasn't running around doing all of their jobs as well as doing mine, and actually I think getting pregnant forced me to stop. It forced me to take a step back. And I was still, at 6 weeks postpartum, I ran a wedding for 170 people and was on my feet for 12 hours that day. But I don't let people down either. So, and I had a really good time too. But at the same time, I never would have even been able to dream of doing something like doing a wedding 6 weeks after having a baby if it wasn't for my amazing team. And hey, 2 days after I had my daughter, they ran a wedding for 160 people without me and totally nailed it. So, that's a real moment where I was like, oh, they can do it. And, it's been a shame that we haven't been able to kind of do the kind of weddings, obviously, that I had booked in, and we were fully booked because of COVID. But I literally just can't wait to get them all back together again and kind of, build what we've got, because we're a little family and they're great.
Yeah, and it's an interesting point that you raise about that sort of level of control. I think certainly within our industry, if you feel like you don't have control of the service, then you haven't got control at all. And then that automatically then flows down to people. So, I mean, other than going to get pregnant and being taken out of the game for 9 months, what would you recommend to someone who's perhaps thinking, well, what's the first step on that road to giving a little bit of control and building my team's confidence?
I would say making time to talk and understand people, scheduling, time to sort of connect with them individually. Don't be afraid of asking their advice. Say, well, we usually do it like this, but if you've got an idea, I'm happy to listen. And I always reinforce at the beginning of every shift, there's no such thing as a stupid question. That's been quite important. So especially with some of my younger staff members that are sort of learning the ropes, sometimes they'll do something wrong or, hide it because they're maybe afraid of being told off. Whereas if you kind of break that boundary down first and just go, no, there's no such thing as a stupid question, just ask me. I'm not that terrifying. And if I am, you can just tell me if I'm being terrifying.
Yeah.
I would say keeping a sense of humor about it is really important as well. Don't be afraid of making fun of yourself a little bit. But also you need to know, you have to be able to put boundaries in as well. You need, when actually, no, what I say goes, and this is why. But explain why. Don't have a rule without a reason. Don't be a dictator. Explain why. And as I said, if someone's got a different way of doing it, you can explore that. And I've done it before where okay, you want to do it this way, let's try your way. Now, what do you think? Which way is better? Oh, okay, yeah, actually, chef, your way is better. But then they're on board. You know what? And the energy of the kitchen is totally different.
It's about getting the long term buy-in as well. And as you, it's so interesting. Like, for me, it's one thing that I personally struggle with at the moment, to the point where the Burnt Chef project needs to expand. And I know that you and I have spoken about this already, but in order for me to be able to give up creative control on certain areas and be able to let someone else who's probably going to be a much better at doing it than I am, it's that control, it's that grabbing hold of things with both hands.
Relate to that entirely. Yeah, because ultimately they're not going to do it quite like you do. But actually, if you can, I think when building a business, making sure that you've got an ethos and you've got core values that you all believe in and adhere to, then actually, if you interpret those in a slightly different way, then that's okay. And I think keeping those communication channels open with people that you work with, like, I can say, like, you know what, I find it really, really difficult that I'm not at this wedding right now. I might have a 2-day-old baby and I'll be sending them a message being like, guys, it's killing me that I'm not there. How's everything going? They're like, just, go away or something. We don't need you. It's fine. Or, by the way, here's a picture because we know that you're nosy. Oh, okay, that looks great. Right, fine. And I think just, communication with people about how you feel is just the most important thing of all at every level. And if someone isn't open to it, if someone struggles with that, don't take that as an affront on yourself. It's probably something that they're struggling with, and that's okay. I think we interpret other people's reaction as a affront to ourselves, and I think often it's because we're not understanding the key difference, between our own business and somebody else's business. But as soon as you start using words like should, you're in the danger zone. Whereas if you use a word like could instead, when you're communicating with someone, it puts a totally different dynamic on it. And yeah, again, it's I think, again, it is just connecting with people and taking time to do that, but also doing it with yourself. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? Why does it matter so much? And if people are on board with that, then, delegating is easier because you feel that you've got the connection.
So what comes first, thoughts or feelings?
I've never really considered that question. They kind of come together, don't they?
One is a reaction of the other one, but there's a big debate at this moment in time about, do you have the thought first and then have the feeling and react to that afterwards? Or do you have a feeling and then the thought follows? So, do you go, I feel bad, and then you think, oh, well, this situation's bad? Or do you go, this situation's bad, and then go, oh, yeah, this situation feels really bad?
Well, I think it's both, because definitely if you tell yourself something, if you think something, then you're going to get a feeling that comes after it. And therefore, sometimes correcting yourself, kind of the way you're talking to yourself in your own head is really, really powerful. And that's where things like, CBT comes in. And I'm, for example, absolutes, I'm never going to be any good at making meringues ever. Or like, for example, an absolute, like, I'm always going to feel this, means that you're creating a rule in your own head. So you're never going to, be able to master that thing that you find that's so difficult. But however, if you rephrase, even in your own head, I really struggle with X, Y, and Z, it means that at least there's a possibility. So I find this difficult rather than I can't do it. And also making sure that your team are using a language which allows for kind of growth and possibility, I think is really important as well. And yeah, just watching yourself when you do that is tricky. But yeah, so that's what I mean about the thoughts coming first and the feelings coming afterwards. However, I think sometimes a feeling comes, and that usually is because we haven't really connected with ourselves about what's going on, and it's our subconscious and our gut instinct going, yoo-hoo, listen to me, something's not right. And therefore, I think, that it's at that point we need to kind of stop and check in and be like, okay, what's going on here? And sometimes what I realized is that you can feel really low and really rubbish for actually very little reason at all. Sometimes it's just simply your hormones. You've had a bad diet, you've eaten the wrong thing, and actually you just need to, take a few deep breaths, try a bit of yoga, or just change states, splash your face with some water, do something to just change your state. Run up and down on the spot really quick. Do 20 star jumps, whatever works for you. And that can just break the cycle. But sometimes, yeah, it obviously is caused from something. But I think one of the things I used to struggle with is if I felt a certain emotion and I'd have to attach it to something. Like, oh, I feel low, it's because of this, because I had to have an explanation of it. It was actually something, especially with mental health, it is just the feeling, and actually it isn't anything other than that. And considering that as an option can sometimes just allow you to go, you know what, I'm just having a bad day today. I'm going to go to bed early, and tomorrow's another day.
It's so funny you should say that. I had a flashback just as you were talking about that exact situation to when I used to work in a call center. I was one of those guys, right? And I remember.
Hey, I know what that's like. Yeah.
Yeah, massively. So you're chained to a desk, and if you're looking for jobs that really strip you of all individuality and any free thought, then telesales is it. But I remember going in with my headphones in from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to go and take my first call, just trying to get myself to feel happier and to sound happier on the phone. And then you'd get the calls come through and you'd be like, oh, and it's not until now really looking back that my feelings at that particular time and how low I felt was actually because of the environment I was in. I was feeling that way because I wasn't happy there. I didn't want to be there. I felt like I had to be there to earn money. And as a result, that condition ended up putting me into sort of quite a low mood that I couldn't drag myself out of on a daily basis.
You know what? I couldn't agree with you more. That's why I broke away from working, in London and working in that environment, because I felt it was toxic for me. And although on the surface it looked, completely different, but it just didn't work for me. And I think, again, that's working out your own personality type and a healthy way of getting your needs met is really important. So I don't know if you've heard of the Myers-Briggs test. A lot of people are probably familiar with that one. Yeah, the 16 personalities, obviously taken with a pinch of salt, but it can be really helpful in conjunction with other things to try and understand who, what you need, and to be able to try and get those needs met in a healthy way rather than in an unhealthy way. Or because often you might find that, for example, if you might turn to drink or drugs, etc., which I know both are a huge problem in our industry, and I've seen it time and time again, where people have had no other escape, and therefore they've gone through, gone down those roads because there isn't a way to, there isn't another option. Well, they haven't seen another option. And I think that's what we need to do. That's what I want to try and do, is provide, more options. Which is why it comes back to my idea of helping to kind of redefine what being a chef could be, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's something that we come up against a lot with people who perhaps are experiencing mental health issues, and it's almost it's a lack of control. Sometimes people don't feel that they've got a decision in their life. They are in this job, and this job isn't good for them, and this is hospitality, so that's their only exit is to change their job role, but they don't want to do that.
Yeah, the amount of taxi drivers I've met that used to be chefs, I mean, I've lost count.
Yeah, but also at the same time, we're an industry of 3.2 million people, 72 million worldwide, one of the largest industries in the entire world. There are other opportunities out there that if you are feeling like, you can't have your say, or you feel like you're constantly being, you're sacrificing parts of your personality, then the chances are there's going to be somewhere. And we've spoken to a few of the people, and people like yourself on the podcast, who will allow you to work and build your creativity, but also at the same time have a happy and healthy life as well.
Yeah, it's all about balance, isn't it? And you can't get it right all the time. And I think for me, realizing that perfection was never going to be achieved, and actually realizing that I didn't even want perfection, because actually you don't need to be the best, you just need to be good enough. That was a big one for me.
Okay, that's perfect. And so one thing that I always ask my guests, and I'd be interested to hear your answer on this, is that if you could time travel back in time and grab yourself by the collar at 18 years old and give yourself a stern talking to or a bit of advice, what would you say?
Oh, that's so easy. I know exactly what I would say. Believe in the power of your own conviction. That's it. Have the confidence to be yourself, basically. Don't care so much what everybody else thinks, because it really doesn't matter. It's what you think about yourself that matters most.
It's easier said than done sometimes if that's an unfamiliar territory to you, hey?
100%. And I still struggle with it, if I'm entirely honest. But I think that's okay. I think, the self-awareness is my elixir. And as long as I can try and maintain that on a fairly regular basis, then I'm okay. And I found recently, for example, I've been exploring far more about regenerative agriculture and farming, and understanding how what we eat can shape not just our physical and mental health, but also the health of the planet. And therefore, everything that I am doing is shifting to kind of reflect that ethos. And it has been a really positive kind of experience for me. And I'm getting all these new opportunities coming my way, because I think I've finally kind of spent enough time. And that's what COVID's done. It's been amazing. It's forced me to stop. And it's forced me to kind of, spend time working out what's really important and why. And for me, that's something that gets me up in the morning. That's something that drives me, and I feel that it's something that's good, it's wholesome, it's real, and I can work with it. And yeah, I think it helps me get better balance. Those three things: healthy body, healthy mind, healthy planet. That's me.
Jacqueline, what a perfect point to end on. Was there anything else you wanted to sort of add before we finish up?
I just wanted to say thank you to you for giving me the opportunity to talk about these things, and also to say to anybody that listens to this, feels that no one understands them, and that all hope is lost. I've been there. I know what that feels like. It's not true. Reach out. You will be surprised. People want to listen to you more than you think, and it just takes a little bit of courage. But it will be the best thing that you've done, to be courageous and to be honest with yourself and with the people that love you, because you will get the support that you need. And how you feel right now is not how you will feel forever.
Perfect. Well said. Thank you very much. Lovely
It's been a
chatting to you.
pleasure. Thank you. Take care, love.
See you later. Bye. Well, that was another episode of the Burnt Chef Journal there with Jacqueline. It was such an amazing episode with so many different topics covered. I hope you found some of those useful. There were many words of wisdom in there as well, which, even if you take one of those away, could make a difference to your own well-being and to your own life. There'll be another episode again next week at the same time, so please do join us. And in the meantime, if you want to learn more about the Burnt Chef project, do head over to our website, www.theburnchefproject.com, where you'll find a whole host of information, as well as access to our shop, where you can purchase goods to help support the ongoing work of the Burnt Chef project. Also, you'll find information about the Burnt Chef support service we've just launched, and also the Burnt Chef Academy. So do take a look, and we look forward to seeing you again next week.